Remember the video we just put out about this connector burning up on people like I was concerned about, but I was crazy by being concerned about it apparently. I said in that video I didn't want to try and recreate it myself because I don't want to cause damage to any of our 4090s, but you know what? Damn it, we gotta try. We gotta try. So, because we need to know what the conditions are. There's still some residue on this because I was trying to do some AC overclocking, which by the way, I can't come anywhere near anybody's score because I sucked this time around, but that's besides the point. These are included with every single 4090 graphics card. So I owe it to my audience and to myself to try and recreate the use case or use cases that can cause these to fail. So if you haven't watched our previous video about these connectors failing on people, and fun fact, ever since that video went live, like 3 or 4 more people have come forward showing photos and proof of their having damage, from light melting to charred. Also too, we're hearing rumors now that AMD is gonna probably pivot and not use this connector anymore, which is great news because when we first talked about the fear of these connectors, it was AMD was basically already planning on using these 12-pin because it was the new PCIe standard. So now it's sounding like AMD is gonna backpedal and not use it, which is awesome. Let NVIDIA be all by itself in this crappy ass connector. We talked about the scenario at which to occupy all 4, most people are gonna have to use probably 2 dedicateds and a pigtail. They highly recommend not using pigtails at all, but not many power supplies have 4 dedicated. I mean, most only have 2 dedicated or pigtails that come with their power supply. And this is from a 1500 watt HX 1500i power supply from Corsair, which in my opinion, because of SLI and stuff, it would be SLI compatible for older cards, obviously. I would think they would have 4 dedicated. So a little bit of a baked in ad, but also I think an important one to talk about at this point is the fact that Cable Mod sells replacement cables that are designed specifically for taking your standard plugs into your power supply end and terminating them to a 12-pin. Check this out. They even have this neat, like they're pretty. This metal, by the way, that little cover on there. This is metal. These combs right here are metal. But these are gonna be more compatible, I think, in my opinion, than even Corsair's own cable, because check this out. This one's terminating to 4. This terminates to 4. But as I already showed with Corsair's cable, this is what I've been using all along. This is why I said I haven't personally had any sort of issues with cable. And this is our FLIR setup right here. So we'll be having a FLIR camera on this when we do our testing. These are dedicated pins that are going right into the 12 pin plug, and they're fairly straight. I haven't put any bends or anything on this. But as you can see right here on the power supply end, they terminate to 2 PCI Express plugs, type 4 connectors. And I don't know enough about the spec to know if 4 is necessary, but I always thought, like, wait a minute, if the adapter needs 4, shouldn't this cable also need 4? But I guess it depends on the rail design of the power supply, and this is probably safer for almost like Cooler Master, Cable Mod to have more compatibility with more power supplies on the market, depending on their rail design, to have 4 rather than just 2. Also too, you can see they pigtail farther down here towards the power supply end, which allows them to have a single cable running to this end in each pin. That way you're not trying to shove, like these guys down here, trying to shove all these wires into the plugs on that side, which I think is what's making it delicate. Also too, because it's Cable Mod, you can have them configured in pretty much any color combination that you want. So you use their configurator, you go on there, you choose the cables that you, cable sleeving type that you want, the colors. This one's a black and gold. It's got kind of a Black Panther-y looking, that's nice. But I love this right here. They put this on there specifically, 1, not to look pretty, but 2, this helps protect the bend, like bending that way. You know, you can't even bend it very tight to the connector because of that. But the fact is that it kind of gives you a guide of saying, hey, the bend needs to be at least past this. So that kind of gives you a guide to help you, hey, there's a safe radius right there for bending your connector. The problem is most side panels will not accommodate that much length sticking out towards your side panel. That's one of the reasons why here, if I were gonna be doing this test to try and make it as realistic as possible for use case scenarios out there in the wild or out in the field, I would have to put this in a case and then smush a case panel, side panel on. But the one that we showed that burned up really bad was also vertical mounted just like this, so that at that point it kind of negates it. But also coming later this month on the 31st of October, CableMod has a 90-degree adapter coming out, which is funny because when they showed us this and they were like, hey, can we send you some cables to sponsor an ad? I was like, of course, I've been using CableMod for years and years. But I said, you know, the problem with the 90-degree is not all connectors coming off the power supplies are going the same direction. Or did I say power supply? I meant graphics card. If anyone's ever used an EVGA graphics card versus a Founders, you know that the pin, like the tab, is opposite. So you might have a bend going down, you might have a bend going up. CableMod's on it, man. If you guys have never heard of CableMod, you definitely owe it to yourself to go and check them out. You can get custom extension cables made for your systems. You don't have to do all new custom cables to the power supply end, or you can get a full custom cable set, just like all my builds have used CableMods for quite a while now with all the custom sleeving and stuff like Symbiote, Black Ice, like all of them, they all were using CableMod cables. So check them out, there'll be a link down below. Their configurator is pretty awesome. If you wanna know what a cable is gonna look like with the color scheme that you choose, you can just use that configurator and see it. So anyway, highly recommend. They're not just pretty now, they're almost a necessity if you're running a 4090. Anyway, we're gonna start off with just kind of doing a little bit of a heat test on this cable right here, which is the Corsair cable. Then we're gonna, I've already bent the crap out of this, but we're gonna bend it again. I know for a fact if this is plugged in straight, just like this, nothing will happen. It's when people start bending it that problems happen. But we need to kind of get a baseline here with this, with our FLIR camera, seeing what the actual temperature is like on the plug. Because remember, it's melting because of heat. It's not melting because of a short. If it were a short, it'd be a whole different scenario with sizzling and popping and cracking and, you know, it sounded like a freaking lightning storm if it were a ground or a short issue. It's not, it's a heat issue going through the plug that is the issue here. So we're just gonna run Port Royal on loop. Again, we don't know if the guy that melted his plug or the people that are now, like the 4 or 5 people that have emailed me showing me pictures of their melted plugs. One guy said I think he made 3 days, he got 3 days use out of it. We may not get a result today even because it might take a while for it to happen. But he said he got a couple days use out of it and then had to RMA. And apparently the RMA process has not been good. So rather than using the screen recording function on my camera and my FLIR attachment, we're just gonna sort of point the camera at it. So what I need to find right now is where the temperature on the plug stops climbing. But as you can see, it is climbing. Now 35C is not that hot. It's really not. But you can see the cable warming up. See that? We also have the emissivity on here set to matte. It's important to have emissivity on a FLIR set properly. It has to know if it's looking at a reflective surface, semi-reflective, or non-reflective. So the emissivity or reflectivity is important. We're at 42.8, 42.9. Now we started at 26C, which was actually a little warmer than ambient because the card was powered on. Now remember, I don't expect anything to happen here. I have been load testing the crap out of this card. I have been playing around with Port Royal, but I've always used this cable, which is gonna be a better, stronger cable than this. And I have always used, like, well, with the exception of the initial reviews, the air conditioner and stuff plugged into it, which makes the card run at like 35C under load. This is expected to be a non-issue, complete non-failure with this setup. I'm just curious as to having a temperature comparison, what happens with this plug and basically a dual wire set, because there's 2 wires going to each one because of the fact that it's a dual plug. But with it having a single plug going into the pin, that's not bent or anything, where does the temperature crap out at? So we just gotta wait till it's done climbing. So I'm gonna call it between 49.5 and 50C is where the plastic connector itself is at. And we're on the flat part of the connector too. I need to point that out. I'm making sure I'm not hitting the clip because the clip won't be accurate. I'm just to the left of the clip. So right here on the left side. So there it is right there, 50.5. I'm gonna max the voltage and the power limit up. We have got a decent enough baseline. About 52C is where we were with that connector. I'm now doing something that is non-recommended. This sleeve is supposed to protect the wires. That's the whole point of it. Not just because everything's coming together, but it's also supposed to protect it from a bend. But as you can see, I've been pulling the heat shrink out, and I already showed you the outside doesn't make a longer radius, which means it has to pull somewhere. So that is the non-recommended way of doing it. This is just not how you should be doing this. But this is kind of like the way someone might do this. To clear a side panel, you would have to do that. Yes, we are doing the Mythbusters method right now of trying to make it fail, because we need to see where it fails. Interestingly enough, the first thing we've noticed is that it's rising in temp faster. I don't know if that has to do with the fact that the card's already warm, but I am pointing at the cable connector itself, which has not had heat through it yet. So I don't know why it's rising so much faster. So we just crossed 50. It took like maybe a quarter of the time to get there. Remember, time goes by between takes, and I don't remember what I said. So we're already at 52.2. We're hotter with this plug right now than we were on the other plug. And we have now exceeded the temp where we were, and I haven't moved the power sliders yet. So we're talking a C right now, and this is not like it's not within spec. That's about capped out now. We're gonna call it there. Now we're gonna max the voltage and the power limit. Okay, so about 50, high 55s, 55.8, 55.9. It might hit 56 right here. I'm gonna go ahead and push up the clock now. Okay, we're speeding again. It's starting the test. Capped out about 54C. It's down to 51 and going down because the test crashed. Fun fact, that the little side effect, the only thing I've noticed so far is it's actually less stable at a lower clock with the adapter. I don't know if it has something to do with the pigtail. I really have no idea. It hit about 55C. That is not enough, anywhere near enough to cause a failure there. I'm adding a second cable with pigtails. So we're gonna be doing 2 cables to 4 pigtails. Not something you should do ever. And by the way, Corsair did correct me on something. I said that this felt like solid core because of how heavy it is. It is not, but it is definitely a higher gauge stranded wire than what you find in these cables. So that's one of the reasons why they had responded saying why they can get away with going 2 of these to 1 of these, and why this is not the same. This is a much smaller gauge wire, which all of this, these are all variables. Don't do this, please, ever. This is bad. I'm trying to create a situation at which it fails. And if we're only left with it failing when putting it through these extreme kind of circumstances, then it's a little bit less valid to say, hey, it's failing. What I'm hoping here is that we can get more information from those that have failed plugs to be able to say, I need details. What case we're using, what power supply we're using, what cables we're using, which plugs were they plugged into? What were you doing when it failed? Have you bent the cable before? Let's see a photo of the cable close up where the connectors are. You know, we need all those details because we can't just say, oh, we plugged it in and it failed. Because everything has a failure point. Everything in life has a failure point. You can't just say, oh, it failed. It's a terrible plug. But if we can find a common denominator of them failing under regular user conditions, that's where the scariness comes from. So just under 52C, there's 52. Stock voltage, dual pigtails, all bad stuff. Still nothing bad happening. So now that I'm just maxing out power limit and such again, I don't believe that this one would run into a failure. I guess it depends on just how long it's running. You can look at this a couple ways. You can say, one, well, Jay, you couldn't recreate it, so clearly it's not a problem. It's just obviously not correct because the card has only been out for 12 days, 13 days. And there's been enough now reports in 2 weeks of failures at the plug that there's clearly some combination of happenings that cause it to happen. And we're trying to figure out what that is. We've gone hotter than we have yet. I mean, it's at 55. What I want to do next though, before I mess with the cable some more, I'm gonna put an 850 watt power supply on here. So what I'm trying to do is put more load on the rail, which would heat up the cables as a whole. Because again, I need more details. We're to hit 59. I need more details on that setup. It crashed on us after a while. So right now the plug's gonna cool down. It was at 62C. We've got to start making things happen here. First things first, I'm gonna go aggressive bend. It's pretty tight bend. And we're gonna do that and not plug it in all the way. There. I'll seat it on one side, but not the other. All right, we're moving on to some drastic measures. I mean, look at this. The fan on the power supply isn't even running. You know, it's just the power supply is so big. So I think now the variable that we need to move on to see if we can't find some sort of failure point here is, I bent the crap out of this. It's not hurting anything. We've done double pigtails. It's running just fine. The connector here is warm because there's almost 500 watts coming out of 2 plugs right here, but this rail system can clearly handle that. Now we're gonna just leave all the plugs as they are, but I'm gonna move them over here to an 850 watt PSU, which is not, I mean, it should be able to handle this still. Maybe not in the most, like the most idealist scenarios, but nonetheless, should be able to handle it with a little bit more, being asked of it than the 1500. I think one of the major takeaways here is the fact that this is the warmest config so far, but that the custom cable, it was definitely the coolest. Our FLIR battery died. This thing is old and very worn out. Anyway, we had some pretty significant do not do this moments with this that we could not create a failure. Now, does that mean that there's not a potential issue with this plug? Not at all. There's definitely a known condition that has caused these plugs to fail already in the wild in less than 2 weeks of ownership. And I don't know what that condition is, and I was hoping to find that out today. So what I'm gonna end with here is a couple of, ooh, that's warm, a couple of recommendations to keep yourself from ending up on Reddit with a My 4090 burned up. I'm gonna cut this open real quick. I wanna see, there's a hard plastic deal under here. You see that? I wanna know what that is, and I wanna inspect. So this cable is now being offered up to science in more ways than one. But why did they even put it in there? If this is a ATX 3.0 to 2.0 adapter, why are they even in there? There is a lead exposed. And they were both in the same sleeve. So this end being open is fine, but if they somehow touch, there is absolutely a logic board inside there that is connected to this. I just think it's weird that these are just chopped with a little bit of wire lead actually sticking out the end, and they're just shoved down the same sleeve together. I don't even understand why these are populated, to be honest, if they don't do anything on this adapter, because those only are gonna talk to ATX 3.0 power supplies. This adapter is only necessary to an ATX 2.0, so why are they even populated? So in terms of its construction, it's actually really robust. Like I even tried to open up one of the ends here, because I wanted to see, are these 4 12 volt and 4 grounds just crimped into one wire, because there's one 12 volt and one ground coming out of here, and then a sense pin or sense wire for it so it knows which plugs are plugged in. I couldn't even break into it. It's so glued and locked down. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a solid board in there that they're soldered to, and then the wires are soldered to it. That way it's not a crimped connection, but it's a proper soldered connection. Then you have each wire running down into this cable here, where then the 2 sense wires on the right, which would tell it how much wattage is available to it. It's able to know if all the cables are connected or not. It's really actually beefy. And with all that bending that I was doing, it didn't hurt this at all. So the wrap that was on here was more or less just to keep all of this stuff locked down. There's some best practices though. One, I'm not gonna keep trying to get into this. It doesn't matter. This cable's now been sacrificed, but one, make sure you have a proper size power supply for a 4090. But 2, make sure you don't put crazy bends on it. We've already shown, at least in our particular situation, we don't know if maybe there's some defects in these adapters that might come to light later. NVIDIA might get enough feedback and enough returned product to look into it and find out, oh yeah, there's a defect in a batch of these or something. Time will tell on that one. So if you're gonna use the adapter, make sure there's no crazy bends or anything on it. Try and route it as smoothly as possible. 2, if possible, go with a company like CableMod and get custom cables made that terminate into their stronger 12-pin connector with the metal adapter on it, and that terminate to the proper plugs for your power supply so that you can have nice, neat looking cables. But then you have peace of mind of knowing, hey, everything is a thick gauge wire. It's gonna look a heck of a lot nicer. And then they do have the 90-degree adapters coming out, the 180-degree adapters, because as you can see, that's about how much bend we would need on this one to be able to get our radius about 35 millimeters necessary, but that won't clear most side panels. Although this does look a heck of a lot nicer than any of this would have. And I can tell you right now, I've talked with Thomas at CableMod, the owner of the company. They have put a lot of effort into these cables to make sure that these types of problems are not there. In fact, fun fact, they were the one company that was like, hey, you have a legitimate concern with these cables, with these plugs, back when I first talked about it, where everyone else was telling me how I was just being an idiot. 2, if you can, vertical mount your graphics card. That way you're not dealing with a side panel issue of trying to pinch it in there, which would put a bend on there. And then past that, pray. Look, it's not a wide enough problem yet for there to be a quote unquote recall or whatever, but I know it's wide enough to where the comments of a lot of people are, they're not gonna trust this cable. So I guess time will just tell. We tried and failed to get one to fail, which is a somewhat good thing, because if we couldn't just be like, here we go, bend, smoke, that's a good sign. If that had happened, I would have been like, dear God, I'm calling the freaking recall department right now. So, all right guys, thanks for watching. Links down below for the cable stuff from Cable Mod. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Glad it didn't die, because this is my highest scoring card, and I need this if I have any chance of ever beating Steve.